Well, Hoosier Nation, we had a bonus podcast episode for you Friday night. Indiana took care of business against the Illinois Fighting Illini. There were good things that happened in that game. There were issues that you and I and everyone we saw. Yeah, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't a painting, beautiful scene of football. Indiana, though, bottom line is 1-0. If you haven't listened to our bonus podcast, make sure you do that. It's up on YouTube. It's up wherever you listen to podcasts. Tonight, we're going to wrap up our thoughts from the Illinois game, introduce you to a new member on our IndianaHQ team, preview the matchup against the Idaho Vandals out of the FCS, and why you should tune in. This may not be a 45-point win against this FCS Big Sky Conference team. We'll tell you why Tom Allen should stay up at night when it comes to these Idaho Vandals. And we'll dive into so much more here on episode 262 of the Hoosier Sound, where we're the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Monday, Labor Day, September 5th, 2022, where I am your host, Nathan Krishnan. Here with me tonight is our newest team member, Charlie Mason. Before we dive in to the X's and O's, Charlie, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. You were there in person at Memorial Stadium, up in the press box to watch Indiana knock off Illinois.
Yeah, let me tell you, it was insane. For that to be my first IU football game, my first home IU football game was incredible. The electricity in the beginning, the picture on our Twitter of fans filing in. Then we seconded that photo with like 30 minutes later, a packed rock. It was incredible to see the student section on their feet, the fans below us on their feet. The atmosphere, it was hard to hear in the press box. I'm going to be honest with you. When there were a couple of those big turnovers and big passing plays, it was really something special.
The Hoosiers crowd definitely showed up in the first half. I know some of you have some thoughts about how many people were left at the end of that game when everything was on the line. But hey, Memorial Stadium did deliver in that first half. And look, folks, Charlie's he's a true freshman. He's going to be around here for a while. Get to know our newest team member. Charlie, let's fast forward to that final drive, right? Everyone's seen the highlights now. Everyone's seen the box score. Everyone's heard the comments and the stories. But Connor Bazelak got the football at his own 25-yard line with a little over 2 minutes to go. Indiana trailed by 4. Bazelak had one objective: get the ball into the end zone. As you were watching it from the press box, what was the vibe you got from the team on the sideline? What was the vibe you got in the crowd? Did you really feel like Indiana was going to do it? Or were you concerned given how things were going in the third and the fourth quarter?
Let me preface this. Coming out of the third quarter, the press box was dead. The stadium was dead. It was just a disappointing run, disappointing 15 minutes, kind of on both sides. And then Illinois kind of took the lead coming into the fourth quarter. We tweeted Indiana's last 5 drives leading up to this final drive. It was interception, punt, 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 punt. There was no winning with this offense in the third and fourth quarter. So if I'm going to be honest with you, we get the ball back. Indiana gets the ball back with 2 minutes left. Nothing. No reaction. This has happened maybe 4 or 5 times in the past 10 minutes to no result.
Yeah.
So nobody's excited. Connor Bazelak takes over. Tom Allen in a press conference told Connor, do what you have to do to get the job done. Score in whatever way you possibly can. And Bazelak took that advice and ran with it. Actually, he passed with it.
That's right. That's true.
He went 7 for 10 on that last drive. And when I tell you, when he was finding DJ Matthews, he was looking for Cam Camper. Every time he made that pass, people started murmuring. The excitement was kind of building. And he got to that 5th or 6th pass. There was like a 30-yard breakout pass. I think Cam Camper might have had a big catch and run. People were on their feet. I mean, even in the press box, people were on their feet. There's no cheering up there, but there were definitely some people standing and on the edge of their seat. And when that final drive kind of kind of came to an end. There was a joke made in the press box. Somebody after Shivers scored, somebody looked back and said, "How how far was that rush?" And they said, "I think it was less than a yard." And some guy chuckled and said, "Yeah, that seems about right." So there was definitely some excitement that ended in a dramatic fashion, but it was electric. It was electric.
Man, I can only imagine what it was like in person, just based on what it was like watching it on TV, where the family, my family, with whom I was watching the game Friday night, we were oohing and eyeing after every play, and we we didn't have to pay to get in the stadium in the first place. So, look, folks, yeah, at the end of the day, Indiana locked in the win, beat the Illinois Fighting Illini 23-20. Unfortunately for the Hoosiers, no Big Ten Player of the Week honors on offense, defense, special teams, or freshmen, even though they had reasonable candidates in all those departments. I'm surprised Cam Camper didn't get much love. Instead, they gave co-offensive player of the week to Sean Clifford and Anthony Grant, the Nebraska running back. Grant fully deserved it, if you ask me, but Clifford, I thought maybe they threw a bone in his direction. Not quite sure why compared to Camper's performance. With that said, though, Indiana did announce their players of the week as far as the program is concerned. It was Connor Bazelak and DJ Matthews that won offensive player of the week. Cam Jones and Lance Bryant respectively won defensive player of the week, and special teams went to Noah Pierre. So Indiana locks in that first season opening win. However, as high as the highs were from that Big Ten victory, Tom Allen did break some tough news in his Monday press conference earlier this afternoon, where Allen did announce that senior leader right tackle Matthew Bedford suffered a torn ACL late in the second quarter against Illinois. Bedford actually walked off the field with some assistance on Friday night, but upon further examination, Bedford did tear his ACL. He is out for the season, a crushing loss to this offensive line that had major concerns coming out of that first game and going into that first game against Illinois. Charlie, Tom Allen did mention that Parker Hanna, a 4-year starting offensive tackle in Division II, who transferred to IU, will take over as the starting right tackle. But on one hand, it's good Indiana's got Idaho coming up. On the other, this is already going to be a tough adjustment for Tom Allen and Walt Bell and Darren Hiller and the entire Indiana staff.
Yeah. My thoughts on it. I think that, I don't know. I see it kind of as it's not a positive. It's a terrible thing that it happened. I mean, Matthew Bedford's going to be it's a huge loss, but Tom Allen in the press conference today kind of talked about Parker Hanna taking over and how it mirrored Matthew Bedford's rise up into the position that he's currently in. An injury early in the season with a big significant offensive tackle.
Yep, that was Coy Cronk back in 2019. I was at Memorial Stadium for that game. It was tough to watch, and you're right, Matt Bedford did step in.
So we'll see if Hanna can hold himself to the same standard that Bedford did. But honestly, with the offensive line, I think there's a lot more to explore there than just the one injury. Crushing loss, but I think IU has to focus. Tom Allen's motto is which game is the most important? The next game. So I think he's got to take it week by week and kind of adjust his game plan in a way that kind of helps this IU front the best it can against the opponent that they're playing. So
yeah, and you saw Walt Bell call some plays that helped the offensive line. You saw Indiana try to use that screen game a little bit more. I'm sure Bell has some tricks up his sleeve as the season goes on. Maybe won't take them out against Idaho necessarily. But as you were talking about the other areas to evaluate on the O-line, Luke Haggard, the left tackle, graded out very well per Pro Football Focus. He had a really strong game, but basically every other spot on the O-line was average to below average. And that includes Hanna in the 44 snaps that he played on Friday night in place of Bedford. Of course, though, the argument there, to Hanna's credit, is he was thrown into the fire. Now he's going to have a full week of practice to prepare for Idaho. We'll see how that goes there. Now, what I will say is that on IndianaHQ.com, we do have a breakdown of Parker Hanna to some degree. Again, it's condensed in a nutshell. If you're curious to know more about Indiana's new starting right tackle, whom, again, Tom Allen explicitly mentioned will get the first crack at the right tackle job, he is a 6'5", 302-pound right tackle who, as I mentioned, transferred in from West Texas A&M. He attended Stratford High School in Houston. That's the same high school that Andrew Luck went to before Luck went to Stanford and then had his NFL career with the Indianapolis Colts. After Hanna put his name in the transfer portal, he received offers from from Division I schools, Sam Houston State in the FCS, and then Rice, Tulsa, UNLV, and Louisiana Tech from the FBS. So that's what is facing Darren Hiller here, Indiana's offensive line coach. If Hiller and Walt Bell and Tom Allen want to dig deeper, some other options include redshirt freshman Joshua Sales from Indiana, Brownsburg High School, I believe. And then you have true freshman Carter Smith out of Ohio, Bray Lynch out of Westlake High School in Texas. You also have Luke Wigginton and Randy Holtz on your depth chart. Tom Allen also pointed out the possibility that Khalil Benson has some versatility as far as inside and outside goes on the offensive line. So Indiana has improvements to make on their offensive line. We asked you on our Hoosier Sound Weekly podcast poll what area of improvement you're looking forward to seeing Indiana fix the most against Idaho. We'll get you that answer in just a second. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports. And I have to tip my cap to Micah McFadden and Peyton Hendershot, Hoosier football legends doing their thing in the NFL. McFadden, a 5th-round pick, basically locked himself into making the Giants' 53-man roster early in the preseason. But what's interesting is since then, over the course of the last week, the Giants released veteran linebacker Blake Martinez. That really opens the door to McFadden likely starting week 1 on Sunday in the late afternoon window against the Tennessee Titans. For those Colts fans listening to this podcast, yeah, that means McFadden could help you out in that AFC South race. Keep your eye out for McFadden on the Giants. If not starting, definitely playing a significant role. Then you have Peyton Hendershot, undrafted free agent, taking the Cowboys by storm, making the 53-man roster. Fun fact, he's changed his jersey number to 89. That's what you can look forward to as the Cowboys take the field on Sunday night against Tampa. We'll see if Hendershot is an inactive for that game or if he actually is able to suit up on Sunday and take a shot at Tampa Bay. Tom Brady, not too bad for the first NFL game in Peyton Hendershot's career. Also, IU field hockey, great weekend. They went 3-0, beating Stanford, Cal, and UC Davis over this Labor Day weekend. Great start for them. Watching field hockey in person, low-key, super underrated in-person sporting event experience. It is incredible to watch them play. Very much recommend it if you have the chance this fall. Folks, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at IndianaHQ and at the Hoosier Sound. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. That kind of support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. Now, as I mentioned, we asked those of you on our Hoosier Sound podcast poll, what area of improvement are you looking to see Indiana fix the most going into this week 2 matchup against Idaho? Now, I don't expect a line to come out for this IU-Idaho game until Friday night or Saturday morning. We'll keep an eye on it and let you know over on IndianaHQ, over on Twitter. But as I look at this, we asked, hey, are you looking for improvement in the run defense, the better run game, better pass protection, or otherwise? The vast majority of you voted for the better run game, as 59% said that. We did get some comments as far as other areas that folks are looking forward to seeing? How about Segi out of Straight No Chaser replying to us saying overall tackling, specifically at first contact? Hey, there's no question they're going to look forward to seeing that. I believe Chad Wilt specifically pointed that out in his press conference. And Travis Scheidler's is better O-line play overall. Can't really disagree with that. Hey, Charlie, as you look forward to Indiana's improvements on Saturday, do you agree with the fans that the better run game is the biggest improvement coming up, or do you see something else?
I absolutely agree. I almost voted in this just because I was so passionate about it.
I love it. I
I was
love it.
doing
Yeah.
some I was doing some research just to refresh.
Yeah.
And I remember tweeting at one point that we had 33 yards total on the run game against Illinois with 19 carries, which was less than 2 yards per carry, and that's just against an Illinois defense that has a really strong front. I understand it. We were able to expose their secondary, which was really nice. That got us the win. But I think that throughout the season, especially in week 2, a team that might not be as strong as the competitors that we have later in the season, I think that Indiana has an opportunity to kind of work on their run game, and I think that Saturday is going to be the time that they need to use it the most.
Yeah, if not, if it does definitely seem like Saturday night is their best shot. However, if you look at how the Idaho Vandals played in week 1, it may not be that easy. Folks, let's move on here to this second game on the Indiana football schedule. Idaho out of the Big Sky Conference visits Bloomington for the second consecutive year. It's a Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern kickoff on Big Ten Network. I see our social media influencer, Chronic Hoosier, has mentioned that Indiana is actually open as a 21.5-point favorite versus Idaho with an over-under at 54. So that gives you a general idea of what the odds makers feel Indiana will be able to do on Saturday night. The Vandals are out of the Big Sky Conference. They have a new head coach this year. It is Jason Eck, not Paul Petrino, who moved on after last season. Jason Eck has a little bit of a Big Ten background, a little Wisconsin history, offensive line focus, 20 years as an assistant under his belt at a number of different stops. And in his first game, Eck led his team to within one score of the Washington State Cougars in a border battle at Pullman in the Pac-12 stadium. Idaho had the football in Washington State territory late in that game on their final drive, but it fizzled out at the very end on a turnover on down. So Washington State escaped with a win. But wow, for a 28-point underdog in that contest, Idaho did quite well in X first game. If you do want to look at last year, Indiana won 56-14, but the Vandals have almost a completely new cast of characters on their squad, including quarterback Giovanni McCoy, who had a pretty impressive game against Washington State. It felt like his legs as well as his arm kept Washington State's defense off balance over the course of the entire contest. How about wide receivers, Jermaine Jackson and Hayden Hatton? Now, Jackson's a 5'7" receiver, but he put up over 100 yards receiving against Washington State in week 1. Hayden Hatton didn't have a great game against the Cougars, but looking back to last year, Hatton had 94 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns against the Hoosiers in Bloomington. So he's not someone that this IU coaching staff, especially Tom Allen, is going to forget. A number of interesting players on their defensive side at all 3 levels. Matthias Bertram forced 2 fumbles against Washington State. Leonic Tamba had 1.5 sacks. And Charlie, overall, Washington State averaged about 5 yards per run, and they averaged about 5 yards per pass. Now, I know you want Indiana's run game to improve, but right now, what are the things you think are keeping Tom Allen up at night as he game plans for Idaho? Because if you ask me, it's not going to be as easy as it was last year.
No, I completely agree with you. If I'm Tom Allen right now, I'm not worried about their run game, but I'm not happy or satisfied that they're averaging 5 yards a carry. Just a quick stat: last game, Idaho against Washington State had around 70 yards rushing, which is not great, not good at all. But the Hoosiers can't really, complain because they had less than half of that. So looking at the statistic between IU and Idaho right now, Idaho has a lot more rushing yards than IU has,
Yeah,
which
true.
isn't hopefully going to be a problem as we saw Cam Jones kind of step up in the
Yeah.
game big time with those big tackles. Their defensive front still pretty strong. Didn't lose anybody on injuries there. But I think that getting to the Idaho quarterback is going to be the number one focus that IU should have defensively. Washington State was able to get to the quarterback 7 times for 7 sacks, which was really big. But I do think that Idaho kind of has that grit, that fire that IU had in the last 2 minutes. Something interesting. Their last drive, they had 75 yards and 8 plays. They got the ball back. That was their last touchdown. They got the ball back with 2 minutes left, less than 2 minutes left, with I think it was on their own 20.
Yep.
Which kind of mirrored the exact situation that IU is in. The only difference is that they didn't get the score. So these two teams are looking very similar in a scary way. I don't know how experienced or how put together the Idaho coaching staff is with Jason X stepping in. I know that IU has done a great job kind of keeping the program together, even with the 9 new coaches, like Tom Allen said, and then 35 new players. So honestly, if I'm Tom Allen, I'm focusing on defensive pressure, and letting Walt Bell handle the run game. But I'm working on defensive pressure if I'm him.
Makes total sense. Yeah, especially if the weather's a little shaky in Bloomington on Saturday night, which looks like something that could be in store if you look at the extended forecast. Of course, we're still a few days away from that, but you could get some rain, you could get some wind on Saturday night, and putting guys up in the face of Giovanni McCoy could be the answer. You saw Indiana have some success getting to Tommy DeVito on Friday night, right? Different guys, and I'm sure I'm missing a few, but Bo Robbins had that big sack at the end of the game. You talked about Cam Jones coming in on a blitz. You had seen a number of other Hoosiers get in the conversation, get their face in front of DeVito and affect the throw. That kind of mentality will be really important. And hey, one matchup I'm looking forward to seeing is what improvements Tywan Mullen and Jalen Williams can make out on the boundary against Jermaine Jackson and Hayden Hatton. In those instances where Idaho passes the football, can you make sure that Jackson and Hatton don't break one, don't go off on a big play here, and get Idaho really into the game emotionally, especially. Eck is someone who's an aggressive coach. He went on a number of 4th downs in plus territory against Washington State, and the explosive plays were there for Idaho. So that's something that Tom Allen needs to look out for as well. Overall, I'm keying in on a few guys, as I talked about. Tywan Mullen as a Hoosier player I'm looking to step up. Jalen Williams, some of the younger players on both sides of the ball, the younger offensive linemen who are going to get a shot here, starting with I should say the newer offensive lineman in Parker Hanna stepping in at right tackle. I'm also keying in on AJ Barner. I'm looking forward to seeing him have an interesting game as he gets his feet wet in that starting tight end role. And then what kind of improvements can IU make on the offensive side of the ball? Look, Washington State had quite a few turnovers, especially in that first half against Idaho. They lost 3 fumbles over the course of the game, one of which was actually returned for a touchdown by the Vandals. So ball security will have to be key for Indiana, as well as Connor Bazelak avoiding an interception like he had on Friday night. Charlie, as you look at this game, who are some Hoosier players you're looking to see step up here as Indiana looks to comfortably knock off Idaho?
Right. We talked about the run game. I want Shivers to have an absolute breakout. I think he needs confidence now more than ever.
Yeah.
His first offensive drive, first play, he is knocked down, stands back up, and is almost knocked out cold. I think that he needs a little boost after that touchdown for the win. I still think that he needs to get some yards underneath of him, get comfortable, work with the even newer offensive line. But I'm looking for Shivers to break out this week. I'm also looking offensively. I want to see a little bit of a little bit of 1v1 Cam Camper action. I
Yeah,
think that it
let's
was
go.
great last weekend. And I think that putting him on a post route in a 1v1 deep slant, just
Mhm.
the speed, it's incredible to watch this guy play. Um, Again, Connor Bazelak, I think that he could also step up. He talked about it at the
Yep.
press conference today, how he had a run at the end of the Illinois game
Mm-hmm.
that was not designed
Mm.
in the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
It was not designed to be a QB draw. He said he read the linebacker, followed him. Linebacker went with Shivers, and he decided to run. So I think that energy like that from a QB, a leader, from a team that kind of was missing one on offense, I think is going to be really important. So I'm looking for those three players who stepped up last week
Yeah.
to step up again this week even more.
Absolutely. And yeah, one area that I left off as I was talking about some IU players and positions to look ahead to for Saturday. Hey, what's going to happen with that third receiver spot, right? Cam Camper seems to have locked it on one side. DJ Matthews and his explosiveness consistently on the field. Javon Swinton was on the field for the majority of the snaps against Illinois, but the production wasn't necessarily there from him as he only had what was it, a couple of catches for 8 yards. Will we see some more Emery Simmons? Will we see some more Donovan McCulley? Will it be Malachi Holt Bennett? Hey, will there be a third receiver really stepping up and grabbing the bull by the horns like Camper and Matthews did in that first week? That's another one I'm looking out for seeing on Saturday night. We're going to give you our predictions in just a minute, but first it's time for a social media shout out. And as I was scouring the Twitter and the Instagram over the course of the last few days since Indiana's win on Friday night, you saw a number of Hoosiers, hit to Twitter and really, show how fired up and pumped up they were that Indiana won. How about Cam Jones? You can find him at CJones1_ on Twitter. He had a lot of quality content that he released on his Twitter page. Sean Shivers, who you can find at V8, V as in Victor, at V8 Blazing over on Twitter. He was really fired up about Indiana's win, saying that he's a Hoosier for life. Really happy that he's in this program. I love being a Hoosier. More fight coming. That was his quote as he celebrated scoring the winning touchdown against Illinois. And I also saw a lot of really good stuff come out of the Twitter account called Saint Tom Allen. Make sure you follow him or her or them if you don't already. Saint Tom Allen did a really good job sort of compiling key Bazelak throws on that last drive. I saw a lot of quality images that he put together, a lot of video on Cam Jones and the plays he made in Indiana's win over Illinois. And I also would suggest following CFB Numbers if you don't yet. That's a site that I found tracking quite a bit over the course of the entire college football weekend. So definitely wanted to shout out a bunch of different handles. For us, by the way, you can find us once again on Twitter at IndianaHQ or at The Hoosier Sound. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube under those usernames as well. On Instagram, we're not IndianaHQ, but we're Indiana.HQ. You can head over there. We just posted Charlie's wonderful picture there. Like it if you haven't yet, and give us a follow if that has not happened to this point. We're going to have Matt back on this podcast next week. We'll have a 3-man weave going. Can't wait to see that. Hopefully after Indiana wins by 50 against Idaho. Except as we predict this game, I don't think it's going to be that lopsided, Charlie. I've got Indiana winning this one 31-10. And if we are taking it, if we're looking at the fact that Indiana's a 21.5-point favorite, I think it's going to butt right up to that. Indiana's going to win. I don't think you'll be sweating bullets in the fourth quarter, but this Idaho team is better. I think this Idaho team is more explosive, more interesting. But I do think Indiana will show improvements on offense as well. Charlie, as you look at this game, who do you think wins and by how much?
I've got IU winning. Again, a margin a little bit smaller than a 21-point spread. I've got a 24-14. I think it's going to be within 2 scores.
Okay.
And if not, here's how I see it playing out. If IU gets it rolling, Connor Bazelak said, once the offense gets going, it's really hard to slow down. So I think if they come out of the first half with at least 2 touchdowns, they'll be on their path to more than 30, like you predicted.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's just going to come down to the day. So
there you go. Can't wait. And yeah, folks, as we zoom out here, Indiana's got 3 weeks. One is in the books. They got 3 weeks to make sure they get everything tweaked and refined and adjusted, because then it's a road trip to Cincinnati and it's a road trip to Nebraska. And then you really get into the thick of the Big Ten East with 6 of the next 6 games all against Big Ten East opponents. Before that, bucket home game against Purdue. If there's one general comment I need to make about college football over the course of what we saw in week 1, before this Clemson Georgia Tech game tonight, is that the Big Ten East seems like it's better than ever. Ohio State beat Notre Dame. Penn State went to Purdue and won and covered in a road Big Ten game. Indiana knocked off Illinois. And again, that was a pick 'em at the start. Rutgers goes into Boston College without a quarterback and comes away with a victory. Maryland, who you think is just pass, runs it down Buffalo's throat and wins easily. And I haven't mentioned Michigan State, for example, that won by 3 scores. So there are no gimmies in this league, and that includes when teams face Indiana. I don't know what that's going to what that's going to mean over the course of the next 2 months. But I'm concerned. A lot of people criticizing Ohio State for not crushing Notre Dame. As far as I look at it, it's their season opener against a top 5 team. The fireworks may not have been there, but again, it wasn't a game where Ohio State won by a last-second play. So, Ohio State looked good too, if you ask me. Charlie, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to throw in from your end as far as what you saw in week 1 of college football. But as far as I look at it, wow, the Big Ten East, man, looks tougher than ever.
Big Ten East doesn't look easy. I'll put it that way. I don't think you were wrong. I think Purdue's going to be they had a tough break against Penn State. It was just unfortunate. Heck of a game. Actually, I don't know about that. It was a messy game. It was one of the messier games I think I've seen in college football. But I mean, it goes to show.
Week one,
right?
Week 1.
On a Thursday, week 1 on a Thursday. But both teams, I think, are going to bring the fight later on in the season. I think Maryland is extremely underrated. They haven't been good for a while. I think that this year, I don't know if this year's going to be their year, but I mean, they're definitely not taking it slow. First game, they really came out firing. Yeah. OSU, let me preface this. I rooted for Notre Dame for most of my life. For the first 17 and a half years of my life, I rooted for Notre Dame. And watching that game with a new perspective was very interesting as a Big Ten supporter. But I have to say, OSU came to play. I don't know who was saying that OSU should have blown out Notre Dame.
They should have won by more. They should have won by more. Where were the touchdowns? I mean, calm down, people.
It was Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame. I honestly give them props, but I also give OSU props for losing 2 of their star wide receivers and still being able to show up and play the way they did. I think one of their players, Smith and Jigba, was out for a big part of the game.
Olave graduates. Wilson goes to the NFL. I should say Olave goes to the NFL. Wilson goes to the NFL. Smith and Jigba gets hurt. It still took care of business.
MSU had a rocky start. First quarter was a little difficult, but they still came out and wiped the floor. Was it Colorado State? They wiped the floor with them. So I think that this IU team's definitely going to have a challenge. But honestly, I think they can pull up over 500. I think they can go over 500, man.
Hey, it's the march to 6 wins, and look, it feels like there are a lot of teams in the Big Ten that are going to be fighting for 6 wins. A lot of teams in Power 5 football. If you're not in that Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia tier, Notre Dame, really the top of the line type of stuff, getting to 6, it's going to be tough for a lot of teams. I think Power 5 football overall is really as competitive as it's ever been, thanks to transfer portal, thanks to more video film available. There are not that many gimmies as far as Power 5 college football is concerned. We'll see how things track over the course of the next few weeks. By the way, just one clarification: Michigan ran Colorado State into the ground. Michigan State, a bit of a wobbly start, beat Western Michigan. They're always tough against those in-state schools. With that said, let's take us to our final segment here, one we are trying to do on a regular basis here over the course of college football season, our Big Ten picks of the week. As I look at the different point spreads and the over-unders that we see here, there are two that stand out to me. I really like under 42 points in Iowa State, Iowa. I mean, come on. Iowa 7-3 win against South Dakota State thanks to two safeties. I mean, that was an absolute joke to watch on Saturday. I think especially in a rivalry game, if there's inclement weather as well, I don't see how 42 points are scored there. I also like Georgia Southern to cover 21 against Nebraska. I think Georgia Southern will keep that game close. Clay Helton, former USC coach, now in charge at Georgia Southern there against the Cornhuskers. Charlie, as you look at the different games in the Big Ten coming up here in week 2, is there a point spread or an over-under that stands out to you that you think our listeners should pay attention to?
I do. I think that our friends Illinois are gonna not fall, but I think Virginia is gonna cover the spread of 4.5. I think it'll be a close game. But we talked earlier, and Virginia just has the pass game that Illinois secondary, I don't think, is going to be able to cooperate with very well. Indiana did a great job exposing them deep, cutting them up and down the middle, confusing the cornerbacks and safeties. And I think if Virginia understands how to throw a football in the general vicinity of their wide receiver, they'll cover that spread just fine. So
yeah, Brennan Armstrong there, a quarterback that had over 200 yards passing in week 1, had over 100 yards rushing in week 1. That rushing game was a real unexpected twist to his game. Really well known as an efficient passer of the football. And yeah, I'm looking forward to watching that game because overall the college football slate in general, not all that appetizing compared to what we saw in week 1. However, I've always said what that means is you're going to get a lot of games that surprise you, and we'll see what happens as this week goes on. Hopefully one of those games is not Idaho at Indiana. Charlie, as we wind down on this Monday night here, a few days before Idaho comes to Bloomington to take on the Hoosiers, Indiana can be proud of knocking off the Fighting Illini. They have to replace Matt Bedford. In general, do you have any closing thoughts here as we wind down here on this Monday night?
I think that IU just has to stay focused. They've got a great coaching staff, and I think that they've got to use what they have left to adjust for not only Saturday, but the rest of the season, because it's going to be a long season after Western Kentucky. So yeah,
it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. One thing I mentioned on this podcast back on Friday night is if Indiana, maybe in the non-Ohio State, Michigan tier, if they're able to keep these games close all season, right? What that means is in the fourth quarter, you're relying on Connor Bazelak and you're relying on Charles Campbell to help you win games. And if you can get to that point, it's almost like a baseball team that's got a really good bullpen. If you can get to the point where it's a close game in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings, or in football in that fourth quarter, things could get interesting. Speaking of the fourth quarter, my final thought is, Tom Allen, he got a little introspective in his press conference earlier today, talking about time management, thinking back to the Gator Bowl. It was interesting to hear Allen say, you learn and you get better as far as time management is concerned. He pointed out he made mistakes early on and he's learning from that. Allen pointed out you learn how to do a better job of getting information in an efficient and timely way. And that's where I tip my cap to Tom Allen. That type of improvement, that type of experience. A lot of people talk about experience in very ambiguous terms. That's a really good example of how having 4-5 years under your belt as a head college football coach can pay off in victories, because Indiana really executed that final 2-minute drive perfectly against Illinois in order to lock down the win. They scored a touchdown, and they left very little time on the clock. And that's exactly how you had to play it, especially when a touchdown only put you up by 3 points. Illinois had almost no time to go down and even get a field goal. That's exactly how you do things. Those are the edges that this Indiana team has to capitalize on in order to get more wins than the 4-win projection that the odds makers gave them at the start of the season. But folks, that about wraps it up for our 262nd show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at IndianaHQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, IndianaHQ.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.